My name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. This is a channel that talks about my cross stitching and the things that I've worked on this week. If you are new to my channel, thank you for stopping by and spending a few minutes with me. For those of you that are returning, I'm just going to say this announcement up front. This week it's not going to be Floss Cinema. So this should be a Flosstube, assuming that I do only the things that I think I'm going to talk about in this one. So it won't be nearly as long as last week's, but thank you after last week's Floss Cinema. Thanks for coming back and spending some time with me. So a couple of things that I'm going to talk about right off the get-go. So I had a couple of comments on last week's video. One was a question. The second one was a comment, which I'm going to turn into a question and answer, even if the person wasn't exactly looking for an answer, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Deborah asked a question. Thank you for enjoying the stitching that I showed, and she asked a question about who stitched the journey through Banff. So my aunt, who very unexpectedly passed away at the end of February, is the person from my family that stitched that. So it's actually a piece that my grandmother stitched for my mother, and hangs in my parents' house even now. So hence it's sentimental to me for a couple of reasons. One, because I grew up with that. My grandmother stitched it for my mother, and as I said on last week's video, my full expectation is that when my parents are either downsizing or they've passed away, that that version is going to my brother, who's a mountain climber. So hence it was going to be on my list to potentially stitch for myself so I could have my own, but I've now inherited one from my aunt who very unexpectedly passed away, so hence a lot of sentimental. And it was interesting, I was talking to my mom this week about the journey through Banff, because I had said to her that I was planning on coming over. I wanted to see how hers was finished, etc., etc. And it was funny because she was talking about you know, the gates to Banff. And I like how she explained to me, it's like, you know, that the gates to Banff don't look like that anymore. Like, I wouldn't know, but anyway, I do know they don't look like that, and I do acknowledge that they did look like that back in, you know, the 70s when the pattern was created. So that was, it was kind of a funny discussion with my mom, going, you know, that the gates really did look like that. I'm like, I actually do remember that from my childhood. The other thing, the one that was a comment that I am turning into a question. So Gail, thank you for enjoying the wall color behind me. The part that you can't see is that it actually matches the color of the drapes on the other side of the room. So you hear a lot of discussion about, you know, people making man caves. This isn't my man cave, this is my cave. So I have, it's a great, on a sunny day, it's a great room. It's very sunny, and I've had some stitching friends over, and we've stitched in here. And, you know, at Christmas time, there's a tree in here that has purple, silver, and white ornaments on it. So anyway, that's, yeah, I like this room too. She enjoyed the paint color. The question she didn't ask is, what is the paint color? I'm one of those people that I'm always interested in paint color, so I'm going to tell you the paint color, whether you really wanted to know or not. So Gail, in case you were wondering, the paint color of the wall behind me is from Benjamin Moore. It is number 2072-30, and it is called Purple Lotus. So, not that you asked, but I'm going to give you that anyway. The other thing that I'm going to apologize for right off the get-go is sorry for the unexpected product placement that I had last week. Somehow when I was setting up, I didn't realize that it was so prominently visible. So this week I do have a beverage, but I'm hoping that it is not going to show up on camera. But stay tuned. I may post this and it may be visible, and, you know, oh well, there I go again. Learning. The name of this little tool that I talked about last week, which for some reason couldn't seem to figure out while I was on camera, is called Seam Fix. So I got this from my local needlework shop. I think it comes in a couple of different colors. You know, not surprisingly, I got this color because it coordinates with my room, and we all need stitching tools that coordinate with our stitching area, right? Never mind, that's how I justify things. So that's what this is. Like I say, it came in really great when I was cleaning out that ripping out of the 1/1. So that's that. So what's the theme of this week? Well, I'm calling it Let's Talk Home Again, which right now will probably mean nothing to any of you, but you're gonna see why in just a second here. So I'm gonna talk about a previous finish. Like I say, it was kind of funny last week because I felt like everything that I was showing was something that I had not stitched. Here's a lot of stitching to be seen, but by the way, I didn't do most of it. So I thought this week for sure that I would show you not just what I had worked on this week, but a previous finish that I had finished. And so the name of the chart is Home Again. So this is from Leisure Arts. I can't read the number, 694, yeah, 694. So I highly doubt that you're going to be able to read the poem that goes around this border here. And so it says, I hear your footsteps down the hall, you are home again and safe. All the burdens of the day are lightened, and all the night noises are music to my ears. So there's a couple of stories about this particular chart. So again, when my mother was destashing, because she recognized that she was really spending her time focusing on knitting and quilting, this came over, and, you know, she did make the comment that actually, this was not part of the destash. I know when I did this. She had just been talking about it, saying how much she loved it, blah, 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 on and on and on. And the reality was she was probably never going to get around to stitching it because she focuses on other crafts. So I snuck into the house. So at this point I was no longer living at my parents'. I snuck into the house, which is not really that sneaky because I have a key. And, you know, took the pattern out of the house because I knew she wouldn't miss it, and stitched it up for her, and I gave it to her for Christmas, Mother's Day, her birthday, I don't know, one of those events. I gave that to her. So the funny story on this one is, you know, so I gave it to her. We then took it down to our family friend who was framing at that time. And, you know, I went with her. You know, the guy who does the framing, his wife is a painter, so she's always great because she's got a huge eye for color and how things go together. It's always great when Kath participates. And so she went down and she picked out her matting and her molding and all this kind of stuff, and great. So we went down together and I saw that. When it was finished, she went and picked it up on her own and came home and hung it up in the house, and then said, you need to come over, you should see it, we've got it back, it's hanging up in the kitchen, blah, 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 blah. And that's great. And so I went over and I walked into the house, and I do need to turn it this way so you can see it straight on. Walked into the house, looked at it across the room, like it was way across at the far end of the kitchen, and I looked at it and went, and she went, oh my goodness, what? And in my head, I'm like, it's too late. It's too late now. There's nothing you can do about this. So as I looked at it across the room, I realized that I had forgotten to stitch these two birds. Went, I don't know what happened there. They never made it in, but I could see it all the way across the room and went, you didn't actually finish the pattern. You missed something. Now, my mother wasn't heartbroken and all that kind of stuff. That's not... She was totally fine. I just went, oh man, like, you know, the birds are not the most important thing in this picture. And my mother is, she's very attached to this picture, I will say, with all of the health things that have been going on her side of the family. And as we've been dealing with clearing out some residences and people's possessions, and have talked about the fact that, you know, stitching goes back to the person who stitched it. Downsizing, all sorts of discussions going on. And I laughed because she looked straight at me and she said, the only way you are getting this from me is out of my cold, dead hands. Which I thought was a little harsh, because I'm not really prone to, you know, taking the gifts back. And, you know, she is quite attached to it. So she's, even if she's downsizing, even if she ends up having to move into a nursing home with full-time care, this is going with her. At this stage, I wouldn't be surprised if she wants to be buried with it, which would be fine too. Yeah, so it's nice. She's very attached to this particular one. So the ongoing story is that after this, my aunt, the one who unexpectedly passed away recently, was also commenting on how much she enjoyed this particular piece. And so I stitched it again. Now, of course, because she has passed away, it has come home. So I do have a version for my house that I am not having to pry out of my mother's hands before she's dead, nor am I, you know, needing them to be cold and dead to have one. So this is the one that I stitched for my aunt, and as you can see, this one has the birds. So not surprisingly, when I stitched it for the second time, I remembered to put the birds in. So the funny here is that even though I stitched this same pattern twice, I will always be able to identify which one I stitched for my mother and which one I stitched for my aunt. Because the one that I stitched for my mother is missing the birds. The one that I stitched for my aunt has the birds. So a little bit of a funny there for me, because, you know, you could blindfold me, you could completely unframe them, you could, you know, do all of that. You could roll them right out for me and I would know instantly whose is whose. I did put my initials in this one, so they're way over here. So I stitched this in 1995. So there you go. And yes, I'm holding this up for an inordinate amount of time because I'm really hoping that YouTube is going to choose this as one of the screenshots so that I can caption the video with this, because the name of this pattern is Home Again, and that's what I'm entitling this particular episode of Flosstube. Let's talk Home Again. This is the Home Again. I'm really, 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 really hoping that YouTube picks one like this, which is why I'm talking a long time. I'm following Caroline from Off the Grid Needle Arts going, if you just hold it up long enough, hopefully they'll pick one. So that would be great. Hence the weirdness here. Anyway, when you get to this episode, if it doesn't have this, you'll know that I failed miserably. All right, so that is Home Again. That is my previous finish that I myself stitched, so it's not just, you know, other people, other members of my family that stitch things and complete things. I actually did finish that. All right, so what did I do this week? How did I structure my week? How are things going? Well, we're going to start off with the obvious one. So not surprisingly, I worked on the Marburg Nativity, the Bethlehem Star. So no big surprise, this is from last week. I did not take the sides off this one because, you know, we unrolled it last week. If you're new and you want to see what it looks like unrolled, just go back to the previous video because there's a whole ton of talk about Marburg. So what did I accomplish this week? This is where it gets a little bit harder. So the entire, technically this is the right side of the star when you're looking at it. It's my left the way I'm holding it up, but this is right. So all of this is stitched down here. And again, so this bottom part is sort of the ending of this pattern. And then I came along and started on the, good grief, the left-hand side of the star. Can't get my left and rights fixed. Anyway, so started it again, was coming down, and then I remembered that it works best to work this outer one. So, you know, it's a single stitch of number 28 Krynic blending filament, 2 strands, but it's things like, you know, 12 in a row, 13 in a row, 20, 21, whatever, but one. And then the next part in, which is much, much harder to see on camera because of the fabric it's against. So this is a number 32 Krynic blending filament, 2 strands, half stitches. And generally, all the way down as you're coming along here, they're like, it's 3 half stitches or 4 half stitches. It's all the same. And then, you know, because you'll see that as I was coming down, I was doing some of each, and then I went, no, it didn't take me very long before I remembered what I did on the other side, which worked out really well. It's just, so I finished all of this down to the end of the page. Tonight, for sure, I'm pretty sure that I will get all of the 32 half stitches down to the end of the page. And then I'm hoping, and it shouldn't take me long, because then this just becomes fill. Just half stitches of number 28 blending filament all the way down to fill it in. And then I've got sort of the same that you've got, like these 3 beams of starlight coming down. You've got 3 over here. So I am hoping this week that I'm actually going to be able to finish all of the Krynic for this center part of the star, which will feel very, very like a lot of progress to me. I won't be done with Krynic for the top part because there's still Krynic to go in here, and there's some beams coming out below each of the 2 angels. And again, I've got these big beams coming off the side once I get this angel in. So hey, still a lot of Krynic to go. But I am thinking by the end of this next week, I will have all of this center star accomplished, which will feel like like I say, like a big accomplishment. And then it's on to pretty much some DMC stitching, get the angels done. So making good progress on that. I laughed because one of the nights I was working on one and I was fighting with the Krynic again, and I was like, this is the point where if this goes on all night, tomorrow night I'm working on something different, because I've allowed myself the luxury of not saying that I have to be a monogamous stitcher for this. And I've discovered apparently that if you threaten the thread, dear Krynic, if you do not behave, I'm putting you away and I'm going to stitch on something else with something else, and you will be abandoned to desolation. It behaves. So, of course, as soon as I was like, that's it, if this happens again, I'm moving on, I'm working on something else, of course, the very next time I stitched with it, it was like no problems whatsoever. So, threads. Nobody ever talks about that in stitching, but apparently that worked for me. So yeah, I'm hoping like a couple more evenings of stitching, 2, maybe 3. I might actually have all of that center star finished. So that would be nice. So because I threatened and because the Krynic then behaved, this is all I stitched on this week. So yes, and if it behaves again, that's all I'm gonna stitch on this next week. So yeah, it was like I say, if I can finish this center star, I will feel like I've made really good progress on this piece. Enough progress that I laughed because I hauled out the Holy Family piece that attaches on the bottom of this and was looking at it and was having a terrible time getting it to line up, and I was going like, oh my goodness, does this really attach? How am I going to do this if it doesn't seem to line up? Well, the funny thing is the graph on the Holy Family is a different graph size than this. So, you know, here's the graph size on this, and the other one is a smaller graph size. So you can't just actually line the chart up. I ended up doing a lot of counting and making sure things, I'm like, no, this actually all does line up, but if you actually hold the graph up to the other graph, it doesn't line up at all. So that was a little made me feel a little uncertain about how this was going to work, but then I did all the counting and it's all fine, so we're good with that. So that is the Bethlehem Star from the Marburg Nativity. That is the stitching I did this week. I ended up not stitching on anything else. I just worked on that. Like I say, new techniques. If the Krynic misbehaves this week, threats, apparently. behave or I will send you away to desolation. Okay, anyway, check back next week, see how I do. So, like I say, this is going to be a much shorter Flosstube. So I did do some shopping this week. I know I'm supposed to be well behaved, and I have been really well behaved. I know it looks like I've done shopping 2 weeks in a row, and it's technically true, but not a ton. So I picked up a couple of patterns. I've got a couple of friends, they're going to laugh when I hold these up because they'll just roll their eyes and go, uh-huh. So this is Well-Rounded by Hands-On Design. These came out at Nashville this year, so Nashville 2020. I really liked them, but I was trying to be well behaved when I was doing my shopping at Nashville. I set myself a budget and was trying to stay in it. This would have put me over my budget. But I really, really love it. Now, for anyone who knows me, so when is this going to get stitched is anybody's guess. Who knows? I've got some focus pieces that I need to work on. The interesting thing here, so the fabrics that they stitched these on are, I want to say 32 count linens. Now, in the pattern, it just says 32 count fabrics by Stephanie. And what she did for Nashville, and I still think your LNS can order these fabric bundles in. So there are 4 different colors here. Vanilla latte, chocolate milk, Spanish moss, and Valerian steel. Might have those in the wrong order. This for sure is the vanilla latte. This for sure is the Valerian steel. Spanish moss and chocolate milk. Anyway, so it's highly unlikely that I will actually choose those fabrics. Fabrics by Stephanie does do her fabrics in even weaves. So both Lugana and Jobelin, and I have some of those. Fairy Winter Dream is on a fabric by her. But it's likely that I probably won't even use the fabrics by Stephanie. So a couple things. These are small, and so I tend not to use my overdyed fabrics for ones that are really small. Like I think the biggest stitch count is these ones along here on the bottom, which are 61 by 61. So not very big. I want to say like they're sub 4 inches each and get smaller as you go up through the designs. And the fabric bundles don't come, they only come in the linen. They do not come in the even weaves. So I will be choosing my own when I get there. I will also be doing things like changing some colors out because I'm me. So for example, this green here is a little too, it's too much of a yellow undertone for me, so I'll be swapping that out for something. Stay tuned. Sunflowers, everybody loves a sunflower unless you're me, because I don't really like yellow. So I will be changing these into some other color. Don't know what I'm going to change it into, but as I say, stay tuned. Some year, if you wait long enough, maybe I will actually get these things stitched. But the pattern was available at my LNS, and so I picked it up. So that's one of them. The other one that I picked up is Little House Needleworks Kringles. Okay, I love Christmas. I love decorating for Christmas. Yes, I have a bajillion Christmas patterns, and probably never in my lifetime will I have them all stitched and hanging up. But I really love this pattern. To me, this is like this is what the dream department store decorated for Christmas looks like. And even though department stores do decorate for Christmas, it doesn't quite look like this anymore. I feel like this is like Miracle on 34th Street, whatever the name of that department store is in the movie, that's what this is. So again, no imminent plans to start this. I'm not even getting the threads to do it. So fair warning, this is not a subtle pattern. Let me see if I've got the stitch count here. The stitch count is 193 by 232. They stitched it on 30 count Parisian gray, which is a linen from Access Commodities. It takes a ton of floss. So I think there's 20 skeins of classic colorworks. So for example, black coffee, you need 6 skeins of black coffee doing this over 2 threads on 30 count, which, you know, shouldn't surprise you because, you know, there's a ton of black in this thing. So yeah, 6 skeins of that, 5 skeins of eggshell, etc., etc. So 20 skeins in all for classic colorworks, and then 7 skeins of DMC are needed for this as well. The one specialty fiber that is called for in this pattern is, as far as I know, really hard to come by right now. And I remember having a discussion with my LNS shop owner when we were at the Nashville open house at the store. Yay, I'm really glad we had Nashville open house before all the COVID things hit. And it is, it's a blend of DMC 422 that gets blended with an Auvert Soie size 4, number 128. So when I went, I wasn't so worried about the classic colorworks, and I certainly wasn't worried about the DMC because I went, you can always get those. I was like, but I certainly don't have the Auvert Soie size 4 in any color, so could I get that? And the answer is, even in March, it was not available. And to the point where, like, it wasn't even, it hadn't been produced in a number of years is what I was told. And nobody had told Auvert Soie that someone was publishing a pattern that was using it. And so it caught them by surprise that suddenly, you know, they had all these shop owners that were trying to do, you know, order this thing. It hadn't been produced in a number of years. It wasn't even in the list of things to be produced imminently, etc., etc., etc. So, and then of course with everything that was going on with COVID, you know, blah, blah, blah. So as far as I know right now, I don't know that there's a timeline for when they're going to be making it, when shops have access to it. I don't know. Maybe some of the shops in the US have it. As far as I know, both of my LNSs, neither one of them has it in stock. And as far as I know right now, neither one of them are expecting to be able to get it in imminently. But I'm assuming it's, I haven't looked at the chart to find out where it gets used. I'm assuming it's a gold metallic-y thread that gets used to sparkle something up. So certainly there are lots of people stitching this already and are doing just fine without it. So if you find one on Facebook or Instagram, just ask the person what they ended up using. Maybe they had some, maybe they are able to get it. I just know that my 2 LNSs right now don't have it in stock and aren't able to get it, or at least not able to get it anytime soon. So that was the other chart that I bought this week. And then I got these Let Freedom Ring pins, red, white, and blue. And I know I'm Canadian. I do like the combination of red, white, and blue. If you were in other parts of my house, you would know that I enjoy those 3 colors. And I am thinking about a couple of things about where to actually use these. It won't be used in a Let Freedom Ring chart. It will be used for something else. So stay tuned to see if I actually do put these to good use. So just that little pin set, 2 charts. I was fairly well behaved. I'm trying to do really well. There was another lady there who she was buying some fabric, and I really did want some of that fabric, but I'm trying to not buy fabric. I have a lot of fabric in the stash, so I'm trying to be very well behaved about that too. So that is my stitching for this week. So see, I think we're going to wrap it up right around the 30-minute mark. So well within sitcom Flosstube versions of, you know, tube of Flosstube, not Floss Cinema. So I hope everybody is had a good week. I hope you're doing some stitching and that your stitching is bringing you some enjoyment, stress relief, all of the good things that come with our craft. And I hope that I have a chance to see you next week. As I said, feel free to ask any questions, comment down below. I will, in the notes section for this, I always reference what I'm working on. Of course, it's not going to be the biggest one this week because, you know, not a lot of charts. But stay tuned. I'm really hoping next week that I'll get to show you the nativity where that top part of the star is done. That would be great. I would feel really good about that, because then it's pretty much DMC for the top part. Don't get me wrong. We've still got all the bottom part of that piece to go, but it would feel good if I could get to the part where I was actually stitching on the DMC part, because the DMC will go faster than the Krynic. Anyway, hope you had a good week. Hope you'll come back and see me again next week. And again, if you've got any questions, just put them in the comments down below and I'd be happy to answer them. See you next week.